Now, Sean John Combs, or P. Daddy, or Diddy Combs, famous Harlem-born rapper and record producer on trial for trafficking and racketeering. His ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, testified about years of alleged physical and being forced to participate in marathon encounters involving drugs and directed by Diddy Combs and known as freak-offs.
Sean Diddy Combs built an empire that stretched far beyond music. Bad Boy Records, a fashion line, a spirits deal, decades at the center of hip-hop culture. He was one of the most powerful men in the industry, someone artists lined up to work with and companies lined up to sponsor. That's the reputation he carried into a Manhattan courtroom in 2025. And when the trial ended, that reputation didn't just take a hit. It fractured. The case against him centered on federal charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and violations of the Mann Act, which covers transporting people across state lines for prostitution. Prosecutors argued that Combs ran a coordinated operation, using his employees and resources to arrange and conceal what became known during the trial as freak-offs, drug-fueled sexual encounters that could stretch on for days. At the center of the case was his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. Her testimony became some of the most closely watched moments of the entire trial. The government called dozens of witnesses and presented evidence including bank records, text messages, and explicit videos of two of Combs' ex-girlfriends, Ventura and a woman testifying under the pseudonym Jane, engaging in sex with male escorts. Both women testified that they felt coerced to participate in these encounters, while Combs' defense presented text message and video evidence to suggest they were willing participants. Malay-male. That contrast, coercion versus consent, became the fight the entire trial was built around. After 8 weeks of testimony, the jury reached its verdict on July 2, 2025, and it was a split decision. Combs was found not guilty of racketeering conspiracy and sex trafficking, but guilty on 2 counts of transportation for the purposes of prostitution. The most serious charges, the ones carrying the possibility of life in prison, did not stick. But the 2 convictions that did remain were still federal offenses, and they were enough to keep him behind bars. Malay-male. 3 months later, on October 3, 2025, Combs stood in front of Judge Arun Subramanian to learn his fate. Before the sentence was read, Combs tearfully apologized in court, saying he had been humbled and broken to his core. He told the judge, quote, "To Ms. Ventura and the other brave survivors that came forward, I want to say first, we heard you." That's not Combs speaking. That's the judge, addressing the courtroom before handing down the sentence. The 19th News ABC, 7 New York. The 2 sides were far apart on what that sentence should look like. Federal prosecutors argued Combs deserved at least 11 years in prison, while his lawyers asked for a sentence of no more than 14 months. In the end, the judge landed in between, but much closer to the defense's number than the prosecution's. Combs was sentenced to 50 months in prison, just over 4 years, and given credit for time served since his arrest. He was also ordered to pay a $500,000 fine. The 19th News +3. With time served factored in, prison authorities listed his release date as May 8, 2028. But that date isn't necessarily final. Combs' legal team has appealed both the conviction and the sentence, a move that could still change the timeline. Not everyone walked away from that courtroom satisfied. Defense attorney Brian Steele called the sentence, quote, un-American, arguing that Combs was effectively punished for conduct the jury had specifically found him not guilty of. His argument was straightforward. If the jury cleared Combs of trafficking and racketeering, those allegations shouldn't have weighed on the sentence for the charges he was actually convicted of. The judge saw it differently, framing the sentence as a message about accountability for exploitation and violence, not just a tally of individual counts. Wikipedia. Legally, the trial is over. But the fallout hasn't stopped. Combs entered this case as a music industry titan, and he's leaving it as a convicted felon serving federal time, with dozens of civil lawsuits still working their way through the courts and long-standing business relationships that have already started to quietly disappear. Some partners cut ties the moment he was arrested. Others waited to see how the trial would end before making their decision. Either way, the door back to where he once stood is a lot narrower than it used to be. What happens next largely depends on that appeal. If it succeeds, the story could shift again. If it doesn't, Sean Combs will serve out a sentence that, however it's measured against the original charges, marks the end of the version of his career the public once knew. If you've been following this case, let us know where you land on the sentence in the comments. And if you want to stay on top of what happens with the appeal, make sure you're subscribed, because this story isn't finished yet. There are people who are genuinely upset about what we're preparing to reveal. Some are especially upset because, if certain arrests involving women move forward the way we believe they will, it could involve people the public has admired for years. Many people love Ellen, Oprah, and Whoopi, but there are things we believe need to be addressed. MKUltra is not a joke. Someone having control over another person's mind is not a joke. We've been threatened before. People have said they'll make sure I don't make it to Halloween because of the rituals and practices they believe in. When people laugh about Halloween and talk about releasing spirits, they think it's entertainment, but I don't see it that way. There are people deeply involved in witchcraft. We've talked about that before, and we don't participate in any of it. We appreciate anyone who's here because they genuinely care about protecting children, but we don't need anyone bringing those practices into what we're doing. When you understand how people believe these rituals work, you begin to see why some take them so seriously. Whether it's books in stores or stories people hear in church, many believe these ideas have existed for a long time and continue to exist today. The trial concluded with a mixed verdict. The jury found Diddy guilty on 2 counts of transporting individuals across state lines for unlawful purposes. Those convictions alone could carry a combined sentence of up to 20 years in prison if the judge imposes the maximum penalty. The biggest surprise came when the jury acquitted him of the racketeering conspiracy charge. Prosecutors argued that Diddy operated a coordinated criminal enterprise involving employees and associates, but the defense succeeded in creating enough reasonable doubt for the jury to reject that allegation. Although the acquittal marked a significant victory for his legal team, it did not erase the impact of the 2 guilty verdicts. Now, with Ally Carter claiming to possess new evidence, even that courtroom victory is facing renewed scrutiny. In July 2020, you went public on Instagram because you said you couldn't stay silent anymore. You made allegations involving Barack Obama and Joe Biden that shocked a lot of people. How did your story begin? As far back as I can remember, I was trafficked through places connected to powerful people. I went from Buckingham Palace to locations beneath the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, while I was still under the custody of Child Protective Services. It happened in ordinary neighborhoods, strip clubs, and what I describe as elite Hollywood parties. There was never a time in my life when I experienced real peace. Even my earliest memories, going back to around 4 years old, are filled with trauma. So who started all of this? The interviewer asked. How did you go from your childhood to places like Buckingham Palace and these elite gatherings involving well-known public figures? When I was growing up, many terrible things happened inside my home, Carter replied. I tried to tell people. Child Protective Services was called repeatedly from the time I was only a few months old. By the time I turned 13, I had reached my breaking point. I had endured abuse, violence, and torture for years. I couldn't take it anymore, so I attempted to end my life. Eventually, CPS stepped in. I was placed in mental health facilities before entering foster care. I believed everything would finally be over, but it wasn't. I later believed I was talking to someone online, but somehow everyone seemed to know me before I knew them. I was trafficked by a man CPS identified as my 27-year-old boyfriend. According to me, he wasn't my boyfriend at all. He was a trafficker. I found multiple passports and different birth dates in his wallet, yet when I reported it, nothing changed. He continued coming in and out of my foster home, paying my foster parents and taking me to what I describe as elite Hollywood parties and even outside the country. I thought that would have been enough for federal authorities to intervene, but when I reported everything to my social workers, they told me to stay quiet. They warned me that if I kept talking, I'd be sent away where no one would ever find me again. Eventually, you reach a point where you realize the people who are supposed to protect you aren't going to help. Everyone focuses on the famous names, Carter continued. People talk about Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Michelle Obama, Too Short, Akon, Steven Tyler, and others. But what people should really pay attention to are those in between. The people at every level who, according to my account, made everything possible. I was trafficked through schools, underground tunnels, cemeteries, amusement parks, Universal Studios, and into homes connected to powerful people. According to my experience, it happened in many different places and across multiple countries. Now, Sean Diddy Combs, the legendary Harlem rapper and music producer, is at the center of one of the biggest legal cases in recent entertainment history. His former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, testified about years of alleged abuse and claimed she was forced to participate in drug-fueled, marathon encounters that were directed by Combs and referred to as freak-offs. I know there's another shoe that's about to drop very soon, so we're waiting on that before we say anything else, because I know it's coming. I don't know who people thought we were talking to all this time. We weren't just yelling into our phones. The justice system is rigged. There are two sides to so much of this. We're about to contact 2 more police departments regarding things we've uncovered. For many people, Hollywood always seemed glamorous from the outside. You'd hear about massive mansion parties where the entire estate was packed with celebrities, while behind closed doors, smaller gatherings took place in private rooms away from public view. I hadn't even been famous that long. I was just excited to be at one of those mansion parties. Then you start wandering around, looking into every room, and suddenly you realize not every room is the same. The once untouchable image of Sean Diddy Combs is now beginning to unravel. For decades, he was one of the most influential figures in music and business, commanding enormous respect and influence throughout the entertainment industry. But after his recent trial ended with 2 guilty verdicts, that carefully built reputation has started to crack. Now, Ally Carter has come forward with what she claims is explosive new evidence that could deepen Diddy's legal troubles and further damage his public image. This is more than just another headline. It could represent a significant turning point. Diddy has faced controversy before. Allegations and rumors surfaced over the years, yet they never seemed to slow him down. His fame, wealth, and influence often allowed him to weather the storm, and before long, public attention would shift elsewhere. This time, however, that protection appears to be fading. I've always wanted to see her thrive, be happy, and do well because I knew she was living through a nightmare. I was just there to support her. That's what gave me peace. When I finally sat in that chair to testify, it stopped being about what I didn't want to do. It became about standing by someone who needed support. Cassie briefly dated Kid Cudi in 2011 while she and Combs were on and off. During the trial, Kid Cudi testified that he believes Combs broke into his home and set his car on fire after learning about their relationship. Cudi said the relationship ended shortly afterward. Combs denied any involvement in the incident and was acquitted of the trafficking and racketeering charges related to the case. He remains in custody while awaiting sentencing after being convicted on transportation-related charges. Reflecting on that period of his life, Kid Cudi described it as something that hardly felt real. It was crazy. At the time, I honestly couldn't tell if it was reality or if I was living through some movie. Everything was chaotic and intense. I was already dealing with my own personal struggles, so I just kept moving forward. Looking back, I always thought of it as one of those unbelievable things that happened during my rock and roll life. Just something completely insane that I never expected to experience. Diddy's trial quickly became one of the most closely watched celebrity court cases in years, sending shockwaves throughout the entertainment industry. When the verdict was finally announced, the image he had spent decades building changed forever. The jury found him guilty on 2 counts, while acquitting him on 3 others, including the most serious charges. Some viewed the outcome as a partial victory for the defense, but the guilty verdicts continue to cast a long shadow over his future. Now, just as Diddy appears to be preparing for sentencing, Ally Carter says she has new evidence that raises fresh questions and adds another dramatic chapter to an already high-profile case. When I finally got out, nothing mattered anymore because I already knew there was nothing I could do. I knew this would happen if I ever tried to tell the truth. I believed nobody would listen, just like they didn't when I was a child. The people who were supposed to protect me never did. Instead, they protected the predators. My mom has fought for me for a very long time. I met her when I was around 14 or 15, but she wasn't able to adopt me until I was 19. At the time, nobody wanted me, but somehow nobody would let anyone else have me either. If you've counted the cost, you'll understand what we're doing. We don't need your money. Your presence is what matters. If we're in your area and you can travel with us or simply stand as a witness, that means something. There have been The significance of these claims goes beyond simply adding another chapter to an already controversial story. If supported by credible evidence, they could reshape the legal landscape, potentially leading to new investigations, civil lawsuits, or increased public scrutiny. Even if no additional criminal charges are filed, the release of verified information could further damage Diddy's reputation and complicate his legal strategy as sentencing approaches. For any defense team, predictability is essential. Attorneys want to know exactly what evidence, witnesses, and arguments they will face. Allegations involving previously unseen material can disrupt that preparation. If authorities decide to review Ally Carter's claims, Diddy's legal team could find itself balancing the sentencing process while responding to possible new inquiries. Even if those claims never result in formal legal action, the uncertainty alone could make an already difficult situation even more challenging. Meanwhile, the courtroom remained focused on the trial itself. The jury has reached a partial verdict in Sean Diddy Combs' federal trafficking and racketeering trial. They informed the judge that they had reached decisions on 4 of the 5 charges, but remained deadlocked on 1 count. Deliberations will continue tomorrow. At that stage, the unresolved charge was racketeering conspiracy, while the jury had already reached verdicts on 2 counts of trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, along with 2 counts involving transportation for unlawful purposes. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman, who followed the trial from beginning to end, described the tense atmosphere inside the courtroom. The jury informed the court that they had reached verdicts on counts 2 through 5, but remained unable to agree on count 1. According to their note, jurors were firmly divided, with members on both sides unwilling to change their positions. After consulting with both legal teams, the judge instructed the jury to continue deliberating and reminded them of their responsibility to keep working toward a unanimous decision. When that note arrived, Sean Combs was seated quietly while his attorneys gathered around him. He barely moved. The atmosphere inside the courtroom was incredibly heavy. Outside, it had begun raining. Thunder echoed repeatedly, and everyone waited to see what would happen next. At that point, we knew the jury had reached decisions on most of the charges, but the most significant one remained unresolved. Racketeering conspiracy carried the possibility of a life sentence. As everyone waited, Combs' family entered the courtroom. His mother, sons, and daughters all arrived to support him. Before leaving for the day, he told them he loved them. Another point drawing attention was the timing of Ally Carter's latest statements. She did not publicly introduce these claims while the trial was underway, leading many to question why she chose to speak after the verdict instead. Some believe she deliberately waited until the proceedings concluded, while others suggest legal or personal reasons may have influenced that decision. There were shrines used for rituals, Carter claimed. There were areas covered in blood, places where body parts were present, and things I can't even explain. I don't know whose blood it was, but there was a lot of it. The interviewer asked, "Are you saying the public figures you've mentioned were present at these locations where there were human remains, blood, and what you describe as ritual activity? Are you describing satanic rituals?" "Yes," Carter replied. "There were dead animals there as well. At one point I was taken and told I had to perform an act involving Joe Biden. Something happened while I was there, but there are certain people you simply don't talk about. I saw people including Beyoncé, Jay-Z, and Diddy. You're taught not to speak about people like that." The interviewer then asked whether victims are expected to stay silent. "Yes," Carter answered. "Because no one believes you. To them, you're nothing. You're treated as if you're disposable." As I got older, I began to understand the environment I was in. I understood my trafficker, the rules, and why people didn't fight back. Whatever the truth of those claims may ultimately be, the timing has intensified public attention surrounding Diddy. In high-profile cases, public perception can change rapidly, and once that momentum builds, it can be extremely difficult to reverse. By speaking publicly now, Ally Carter has ensured that fresh allegations remain part of the discussion as Diddy moves closer to sentencing. Although judges are expected to base their decisions solely on the evidence presented in court, public opinion continues to influence media coverage and shape broader conversations. Within the entertainment industry, where reputation carries tremendous value, several companies and collaborators had